Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Anne and today I'm giving you my April wrap-up. I only managed to read 4 books in April, which isn't that much for me, but April just seems to have flown by so quickly. I wasn't really feeling like I wasn't reading that much. I knew it was a bit of a slower month also because I wasn't participating in any readathons or anything, but I was a bit surprised at the end of the month when I when I realized that I had only read 4 books, or only finished 4 books, because I did DNF, my first book of the year, this month. But I'm not in it for the numbers, so it's all good. I read one of my most anticipated releases of the year this month, so that's exciting. And without further ado, without further rambling, let's just give the mic to Anne from the past, because I did film another wrap-up on the go this month. It's Sunday the 11th of April and I'm in my bathrobe because it's the weekend and I didn't feel like changing into actual clothes for this clip. And I've also got my hair up, which I'm probably going to regret when I'm editing this video at the end of the month, but who cares. I finished 2 books this weekend. The first one I finished on Friday, and that was One of Us is Lying by Karen and McManus. But I picked this up at the start of the month because I was feeling very stressed, very anxious, and I needed something that I wasn't too invested in. I didn't want to read any of my highly anticipated releases of the year because I didn't want to connect them with anxiety later in my brain. So I just wanted to pick up a quick read, a possibly fun read, and then I noticed this one in my bookcase. I bought this one last year, maybe the year before, I think in 2019. And afterwards I kind of regretted buying it because I picked it up probably because it has beautiful red stained edges and I'd heard good things about it, so I picked it up kind of on a whim in the bookstore. But then I figured, when am I ever going to read this? Am I actually really interested in it? So it was just languishing on my bookshelves, but this was the perfect time to pick it up. I was right in thinking that I wasn't going to love this because I ended up giving this 3 stars. It's kind of a murder mystery set in high school. It revolves around 5 kids who are sent to detention and then one of the kids dies while in detention. And the other 4 are then suspected of murdering the 5th one. And these 4 characters all kind of fall into stereotypes. There's Bronwyn, who is the geek. There's Cooper, who's the jock. There's Nate, who is the criminal, or the bad guy. And there is Addie, who is the princess, the beautiful blonde prom queen type of girl. You get to see the story from all 4 of their perspectives, so you get to see how they deal with this situation, and I really enjoyed getting to know them better and getting to see them transform from these stereotypes into actual fully fleshed characters. That was probably my favorite part of this book. I didn't really care that much for the murder mystery. I kind of figured out, or at least suspected I figured out, what was really going on about halfway through the book, I would say, and I didn't think the setup of the story worked very well. I'm not going to go into any more details because that would probably end up with me giving spoilers, and I don't want to do that because for a book like this you really don't want any spoilers. But it was an enjoyable read. I don't really have that many thoughts on it other than what I just told you. It was fun, it was fine, it was a classic 3-star read. And then the other book I finished was the audiobook I've been listening to for a few weeks now, and that's Dear Justice by Nick Stone. This is the sequel kind of to Dear Martin, which was the story of Justyce. Dear Martin was about Justyce, who is a very good student who wants to go to Yale, who tries to do everything right. He's a black boy, I should say, and then he is confronted with police brutality, and it's about racism and the police system in the USA. It was a very good book. I gave it 5 stars when I read it last year. I think it's a very important book. I think more people should read it. Last year in September, I think, Nick Stone published Dear Justice, which kind of shows another side of the story. I think Nick Stone explained that she wasn't planning on writing a sequel to Dear Martin, but that she kind of realized she wanted to tell the story of a black boy who isn't given the same opportunities as Justyce, who because of his circumstances kind of falls in with a bad crowd, kind of feels like he can't get out of his situation, because Quan, the main character in Dear Justice, had a few very traumatic experiences early in life. His father is in jail, his mother is with a very abusive man, and he doesn't have a support system. He doesn't have people who believe in him. There was one teacher, he explains at some point, who did believe in him, who did motivate him, but the moment she left and some other teacher who accused him of cheating because he was good at maths came in, was kind of the moment that he felt like no one was there to support him. How was he ever going to make it in life? And Kwan ends up in prison. We already found out about that in Dear Martin, because he's kind of a small character in Dear Martin. But in Dear Justyce, we see him in prison, his life in prison, as he writes to Justyce, and they exchange letters. And I think this was a very important and very good story to tell as well. To see the story of this boy who had all the odds stacked against him, so how could he ever succeed? He was always seen as a criminal, as someone who couldn't succeed in life, because that's what society did to him, and then he ended up in prison. I was very moved by his story. I thought he was a very good character. I loved his character. I'm very glad I read it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and I think I liked it about as much as I did Dear Martin. But I think I rated Dear Martin more out of an emotional place, and here I really wanted to focus on the writing and other parts as well, so I came down to 4 stars. But I would highly recommend reading this book. I definitely recommend picking up Dear Martin first, because then you have the context for Dear Justyce, but definitely read Dear Justyce as well. They're very short books as well. The audiobook was not even 5 hours long, so it's a quick read, and it's so important. It's now Tuesday the 20th of April, and I just filmed a book haul with all of these books, so I'll leave a link to that video down below. But I figured, while I've got everything set up, and I'm actually wearing a relatively nice shirt and I've got some lipstick on my lips, let's film another clip for my wrap up on the go, because I keep forgetting to do that. A few days ago I finished my 3rd book of the month, and that is The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. This was one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and I'm glad to say that it didn't disappoint. I gave this 5 stars. This is the 4th and final book in the Wayfarers series, which is a sci-fi series of companion novels that can be read separately or out of order, but I do recommend reading them in chronological order for the fullest experience. And this one is set on a planet called Gora, and there is very little on Gora. There are no natural resources, there is no natural life there, it's just a planet of stone. But it has one thing going for it, and that is that it is right in the middle of all of these travel routes. So that's why the Galactic Commons, which is the union of different species and different races that live in space together, they have kind of designated Gora as a travel stop. They have created tunnels there, and so this planet has become kind of a hub for travel. People can lay over there while they're waiting for their go through the tunnel. And while they're waiting there, they of course have to have some place to go, so there are kind of like truck stop things here, hotels, and we follow one specific truck stop, for want of a better word. And this place is called the 5 Hop 1 Stop, and it is run by Ulu, who is a very sweet and very heartwarming character. She is a Laru, because all of the characters within this book are alien species to humans, and she runs the 5 Hop 1 Stop with the occasional help of her child Tupo. And on the specific day that this story starts, she gets 3 visitors. The first one is Pei. She is an Eluan cargo runner, and we've also met her in the very first book in the series. The second visitor is Rovak, who is a Quailin, and he is an artist. He makes vacation simulations. And then the third character is, what's her name? Speaker. And Speaker is an Akarak, and she is very proficient in a lot of different languages. And these characters I mentioned are all thrown together at the 5 Hop 1 Stop, and they are stuck there together because a freak accident happens in the atmosphere around Gora, which means that all traffic is halted, and all of these people have to stay within the domes or within the ships that they are on. So that's a great premise for a story, I think, and I was really excited to find out how everything would go down between these different characters from different alien races and how they would interact with each other. And I was not disappointed. I really enjoyed the interactions between these characters the most. That was the thing that I enjoyed most. They really are learning about each other's cultures because they don't really know each other very well. The Akarak race, for example, is a race that is often distrusted, and they kind of keep to themselves within space, and they also aren't a part of the Galactic Commons, so everyone kind of views Speaker with distrust at first, even though she means no harm. And there are other things that these characters really don't know that much about. And of course they're strangers, even disregarding their different race. They all have a place to be, they're all on their way to someplace else apart from Ulo and Tupo, and that brings with it its own struggles and its own issues as they're stuck on this planet. And the story is set over only a couple of days, but it was really nice to see how these characters' relationships change over those few days. They start out as strangers, and by the end they really are not. There is conflict, of course, but there are also really beautiful moments. And as with the other 3 books within this series, there isn't that much plot. It's mostly all about character development, it's about world building, it's about understanding different cultures, which is what I really enjoy about these books. I did feel that like this was a bit anticlimactic as an ending. I thought it was a really wonderful book. I also enjoyed that within this book we don't get to see the human perspective as the main perspective. It's really about these different species, but that's also what made it feel a bit separate from the other 3 books, I think, even though I did enjoy it. So I did give it 5 stars, but I did hesitate whether or not I should give it 4 stars instead, because I did enjoy it a little bit less than the other 3 books. Nevertheless, this was a great book. Love the series. I'm very sad it's over now, but I can't wait to see what Becky Chambers comes out with next, because I adore her writing. It's Monday the 26th of April, and yesterday I finished another book. I finished Agnes Grey by Brontë. This is one of the books on my list of 10 books I have to read in 2021, so I'm very glad to tick another one off the list. This is the 3rd one I've read, and I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I don't really have anything special to say about this book or anything in particular, because it isn't very special in terms of plot, I think. This is about a young woman called Agnes Grey, who is from a rather poor family, and she decides she wants to be a governess in order to support her family and earn a bit of money for them. So throughout the book she works for 2 families who are both quite awful in their own ways. And the book shows what life as a governess was like in the mid-19th century. In those times, a governess was the only respectable job for a lady of a certain status, because in those times there were quite a few women who needed to work in order to earn some money, but they were still from a certain class, so not all work was deemed respectable for them, but governess was pretty much the only thing they could do. And this book shows the life they would lead, and it is also fairly autobiographical, because Brontë worked as a governess herself as well for 2 different families, and this book is in large parts based on her own experiences as a governess. This is also her very first novel, and I read her other novel as well, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I read that one last year, or maybe the year before that, and I gave it 5 stars, I think. I really enjoyed that one. I thought it was very good, and I didn't think this one was as good as that one, but there's something about Brontë's writing style that just will make me love everything she writes, or wrote, I should say. And I think out of the 3 Brontë sisters, Charlotte, Emily and Anne, I like Anne's writing the best. Wuthering Heights, which was written by Emily Brontë, will forever be my favorite Brontë novel for nostalgic reasons. I talked about that book as well in the video I made about my favorite books of all time, so I'll leave the link to that up above. That one will forever be my favorite, but I think I prefer Anne's writing. So although this wasn't that exciting in terms of plot, and not all that much did happen, I really did still enjoy it because of the writing, because of the look it gave us into the life of a governess and life in general in the mid-19th century in England. And I'm glad I've now read it. Often when I read classics, it kind of sometimes feels like a struggle to get through it, even when I'm enjoying it, or even if I'm enjoying it, because of the way it's written, because it's a bit more difficult to read. But with this, that wasn't the case at all. I flew through it and it was a great read. So those were all the books that I finished in April. There was one more book that I started but that I didn't finish, and that is Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor, which is the 2nd book in the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. I really wasn't expecting to DNF this book. I was participating in the read-along that a bunch of YouTubers are hosting in March, April and May, and I was excited to read it because I really enjoyed the first book. If you remember from my March wrap-up, you might know that I gave the first book 4 stars, that I was really surprised by how much I was invested in the story and how much I loved it. But the 2nd book was just a struggle for me. I think I read about 1/3 or maybe even 1/4 of the book, I'm not entirely sure, but it wasn't that the book wasn't good, it was just that the book was very dark and gritty. And there was a complete shift in tone compared to the first book that I really wasn't anticipating. It was a bit jarring, and the things that I really liked about the first book weren't really there anymore in the 2nd book. There were no longer any light moments, any fun moments, it was all just dark and gritty and doom and despair, and I really wasn't feeling that. And I think that might have to do with the time we're living in right now and me just wanting books that have at least some lighter moments in them, so there is some joy to be had, but that wasn't the case for Days of Blood and Starlight. And I really wasn't planning on DNFing it, I was really planning on just struggling through. But then I realized that that was exactly what was happening. I was struggling to read the book, and then I figured maybe I should just stop reading this. It was over 500 pages long, so it's not like I would just read it very quickly and be done with it. It was quite a commitment. And then there's also the third book, which is even longer. I've not written off Days of Blood and Starlight completely. I might return to it in the future, but in April I really wasn't feeling it. So I quit that book after I was already reading it for about a week. So maybe that's also why I only finished 4 books in April. And then I picked up another book, but you will see that one in my May wrap up because I finished it in the first weekend of May. So that's it for this wrap up. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please in a comment down below let me know if you've read any of these books that I mentioned, or name your favorite book you read in April. Please like this video if you liked it and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of me in the future, and have a wonderful day. Bye!